Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody here in the room, and hello, anybody tuning into the webcast. This is the panel on women, building the brand, understanding lifestyle, authenticity, purpose, and resolve. So we kind of cover it all. And some of today we'll talk about marketing to women and what makes things authentic to women, but more we're going to talk about branding and authenticity and relevance a little more broadly. So I'm going to ask the panelists to each introduce themselves so they can tell you what's most important about them, and then we're going to take a minute and ask you to introduce yourselves to us a little bit so we can be most relevant to you. Do you want to start off here?
Hi, I'm Michelle Turner. I am the CEO for dictionary.com. Long background in tech, actually, in tech product development, and ended up at Dictionary as both a kind of the charter and a mandate to come in and revive both the brand and the product. And it was a great fit because I'm a big word lover and reader and all that. So.
I am Nina Samasco, and I had a long career in technology. Most recently, I was at Nike, who I'm assuming most of you, if not every single one of you, has heard of. I recently left there and now am on the advisory board of several software companies in the Bay Area.
Hello, I'm Mia Goldwyn. I'm the Chief Content Officer of Style Hall. We are the National Beauty multi-channel network on YouTube. Prior to that, I was at Paramount for about 14 years in various strategy and business development roles.
Hi, I'm Devery Holmes, and I'm CEO of Spark Alliance Marketing, and we're a lifestyle engagement strategy agency. And 2 years ago, we purchased Creative Entertainment Services, a branded entertainment agency.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Romolini. I'm the editor-in-chief and VP of content of Hello Giggles, which is a site for young women founded by Zooey Deschanel. Prior to Hello Giggles, I've been working in women's lifestyle content for about 15 years. I started out in traditional media, Glamour and Lucky Magazine. And after that, I was the editor-in-chief of Yahoo Shine and the editorial director of Lifestyles for Yahoo. So I have some experience talking to women.
My name is Carla Ballard. I'm Senior Vice President of Participant Media, an organization that was founded by Jeff Skoll. And I'm helping to run our TAG agency, which is our internal agency that's focused on cause marketing. Prior to that, I was with Ogilvy and Mather, and I was helping to running the Impact Studio. And my last assignment was helping to implement the Affordable Care Act for the state of California, partnership with Covered California, and running a national initiative with celebrities called Tell a Friend, Get Covered.
Great. And I'm your moderator. I'm Sue Cross. After a long career with Associated Press, most recently running AP's business in the Americas, I left to return home to LA recently and run an advisory building business and audiences around great content and causes. So I'm hoping we can take a few minutes and with some quick show of hands, get an idea where you're coming from so we can speak to you a little more. How many here are in media in some form? Great. And how many in marketing? And how many of you are entrepreneurs? Great. And how many with larger corporate entities of some sort? Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So it's a great mix. Our panel, I think, is a great mix today, too, because we have both media and marketing and technology all represented. We wanted to start off today with Devery, who handles a great deal of marketing, talking a little bit about an issue we debated coming into a panel that has women at the start of it. You know, what makes something authentic to women or men, or how much is there a gender divide or isn't there when you are targeting either content or messages and trying to make them authentic and relevant? So Devery, do you want to talk about that a little bit from your experience?
You bet. My agency represents brands, and we put together marketing campaigns, and we're often trying to target women. Do you know that Boston Consulting Group just came out with a statistic that women account for 73% of all purchase decisions? And in the next 15 years, they are predicted to make more than men. So when you've got a brand who really wants women to be disrupted at retail and notice their brand, how do you do it? So one of my favorite recent examples that Sue and I were talking about was the Minions. So Despicable Me was one of the most successful franchises of all times. And the DVD's coming out, and we have 2 target audiences for Hostess and Twinkies, shopper moms and C-store males. So how do you make the Minions resonate with moms? So we came up with a Pinterest campaign, which was Minionize Your Twinkies. And it turns out on Pinterest, women are going crazy with how to dress Twinkies kids. On the back of the package, we actually did cutouts, and we developed a Facebook app where you could create whatever design you wanted, and we did a mosaic wall. Well, my favorite moment, because they just come back from bankruptcy and no one really knew they were back. This was their first campaign, and we had 3 weeks to put it together. And that Universal approved us is still a miracle. But Reddit said whoever came up with this campaign deserves a raise. And then collegehumor.com picked it up and said promotion done right. And then all the bloggers, you know, in our world, if you build it, they will come. And if you put the right pieces together, the promotion and success of your campaign comes from the consumer. So they had no money. We put an on-pack offer, a great social media campaign, but it was the buzz that really made it effective. And it absolutely worked with moms. We had a 70% lift at Walmart, which was unprecedented during the holidays when everyone's buying candies and cookies, not sweet cakes.
Thank you. And how did you tailor it for the non-mom?
We had a home entertainment system. We had a whole C-store overtake where, you know, Twinkies look like Minions, and we actually put the faces of the Minions on the Twinkie packages. So C-store males really got engaged with how cool this was, and that's why College Humor even picked it up.
That's great. Nina, you had talked about coming out of sportswear
Yes.
and targeting that's gone awry and some things that are aimed at women that didn't work well.
Yeah,
So, Talk
yeah.
about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, first of all, I will say that I think Nike does an amazing job with branding and marketing to all levels, to women. They're very diverse. Other companies are absolutely trying to break into the women's market. And Sue and I were chatting, some of these brands have decided that because they're marketing to women, that things should be pink. And just because we're women does not mean that everything needs to be girly. Girly is great. I like it on some things, right? But sometimes just like, some really fun, cool things that are all black or black and white, you know what I mean, will resonate
Like
as
this
well.
panel.
Yeah, I know. We all kind of like, so for sure, I think that it's not authentic to presume that because you're marketing to women, that women like things that are pink, right? So seems intuitive, but sometimes not.
I'm going to ask the two people running very female-oriented media sites, Jen and Mia, to talk a little bit about how do you tell if you're on track or off track in your authenticity? What do you, and let's get a little more operational with it too. If what measurements do you look at, and how much is it just commenting versus data, and how do you think about that? And then we'll spread that out for the rest of the panel as well.
I think, first off, a lot that has to do with programming and thinking about programming has to do with instinct. So that is first, and that's where it begins, right? But your instinct can be wrong. And what's wonderful thing about digital versus traditional media versus print is that when you're wrong, the audience will tell you, and they will tell you very quickly. They will tell you by not clicking on something, but they will also tell you in their Facebook comments, in their tweets at you, in their comments on the post itself. And so we analyze not only the feedback I'm getting from readers, even though, you have to take it all with a grain of salt. What is a troll and what is real? What's really going on here? So if there's consensus, I do kind of shake my head and I think maybe this was the wrong move. But we look at feedback from the readers, we look at emails we get from the readers, and we also look at analytics. And that is the beautiful thing about being in this business now. It used to be you'd send a magazine out or you send a show out and you had no idea, really. I mean, could kind of tell, but not like this. We know exactly how many people are reading a story at any moment. We know how many people are sharing it. We know, that is such an exciting metric to be able to use. I still think having a gut instinct is really, really important, because if you just go by numbers and you're just trying to game the numbers and game the trending, that's not always going to work to your benefit either. And I feel like having a voice of a brand and making sure that even if you see something trending, it's sort of filtering through the voice of that brand is when you win ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
I think to add to that, at Style Hall, 87% of our audience are female. And I would say probably close to that metric of our creators are also female. So there's a very organic and honest conversation between our community of talent and also our fans. And I think something that you mentioned that is very, very true for Style Hall as well is probably our ultimate measure is engagement. What we consider engagement is likes, shares, comments. On YouTube, anytime that one of our talent puts up a video, almost automatically people can comment. And because of that, it sort of forces the level of honesty and integrity to a certain degree that you don't necessarily see in traditional media. But again, for us, pretty much the most important standard is, in addition to the analytics that we have at our fingertips, which are so amazing within the digital landscape, it is truly that metric of engagement, is how many people are sharing, how many people are liking, how many people are recommending to their friends, to their mothers, to their girlfriends. So for us, that's really what we look at.
Mm-hmm. And either of you test, or do you just put it out there and see what happens and adjust live on your sites?
Well, for us, there's a couple of different things. So within Style Hall, a lot of the content that's created, there's a combination, it's a mix. So there's content that Style Hall creates. So I think in that example, we also usually follow our instinct. We have a team of people that oversee the development process as well. So that's a little bit more similar to a traditional media perspective. But the other piece, and the majority of our content, is actually content that's created by our talent. So in that perspective, we don't really censor it. They put up whatever it is that they want. And to be honest with you, they actually are the people that know their talent and their communities the best. So yeah, that's how we program.
We have a contributor network of 500 writers and video creators, and we do filter everything for them, and we help edit them and mentor them and guide them in the right direction. I'm forgetting the original question a little bit.
It was how you gauge if you're staying on brand or losing some authenticity with your audience.
Well, I think what we're talking about here is one. I think we're in similar positions because we are one overall brand, but it's made up of a lot of different contributors, and that's why we do sort of have to shape the content. Your take on this is, for us, we don't do any gossip, any snark, any takedown pieces, any sort of outrage for outrage's sake. So, and we have a lot of young contributors. We're mostly a place where you're going to write your first thing ever, or you're create your first video ever, and so really helping shape that voice and what does this look like under the Hello Giggles umbrella, I think is really important to us, not only as a brand, but as a place that's mentoring women.
Mm-hmm. And are you able to give them guidelines that they,
yes.
And how broad or narrow do you guys go? In several earlier conversations in the same conference, people have talked about guardrails, let them go crazy with whatever they want to do, because that will bring the authenticity, but within kind of parameters or guardrails.
I want them to find their authentic voice, but I have to maintain cohesion as a brand, Because if you went to Hello Giggles tomorrow and there were just voices everywhere and just nobody knew, you wouldn't really know what it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it has to all fall under this umbrella. And, you know, there are ways to do that that are very specific, and you really get in there with someone and say, you know, change this word. This word feels a little negative. I think you'd do better and people would understand you more if you were saying this. To the broader thing of, you know, no, we're not going to cover celebrity X's divorce, you know? So I think that, I think, you know, that's you're the ambassador of they're the ambassadors of the brand, but I need to give them very specific direction to help them fit in here, because it's not their own personal blog, right? They can do whatever they want on Tumblr, but if they want to be a published writer, part of the great thing is that I'm going to help them shape that. And that's also what legitimizes our brand and makes it feel special, is that we're not just putting up anything.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
So go ahead.
I would say that we have 4,600 creators around the globe. And again, I would say what is so magical and wonderful to see is each of these creators have a unique voice and have a unique brand and have an amazing way to communicate and interact with their fans. So I would say from our perspective, outside of somebody really doing something absolutely terrible that would get them in trouble with the government or God knows what else, we really encourage them and motivate them and honestly act more as a support system than necessarily somebody that kind of mentors and controls what they say. Because I think that in a way is the power of YouTube, is that people go there, they find their own voice and they find their own communities. And it's a very, very open communication platform.
So let me ask, Carla and Devery, you're putting companies up against properties like this and content like this and deciding whether some content fits your brand or is authentic and carrying the message. How are you weighing that, and just in general? And then how do you look at the women's space in there as well?
Well, it's okay. I'll speak to this. You know, one of the things that just coming off of the project and working with a government entity, that was certainly an issue that we had to really tackle. Implementing the Affordable Care Act had folks that were on the side of absolutely can't wait to, oh, blankety no, you know? So we had to really guard the reputation of that corporate brand and look at.
Can you step
Sure.
back a minute and just tell them a little more about what the project was?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, 'cause it's
absolutely. So I was just mentioning the campaign that I just finished running called Tell a Friend, Get Covered. And this was a national campaign focused on changing the conversation. If we remember last October and November, from healthcare.gov not working to the fact that we were now implementing one of the nation's most historical healthcare acts called Affordable Care Act, and focused on getting people insured. So Covered California was the client of my former employer, Ogilvy and Mather, and what we decided to do is to launch a campaign where we worked with 85 celebrities, and we also worked with Maker Studio, which is an MCM, as well as Funny or Die, to create viral campaigns and viral content to help change the conversation. So in doing that, we were ultimately leveraging a social media platform to get the message out, as well as earned media. And so as a result, we had to tackle the issue for a government entity even entering into this space, because certainly you can't control 85 traditional celebrities, nor can you control the YouTube community. So that was something that I wrestled with every day, 24 hours a day in some cases. And it was definitely a year for me as a result, you know. But the good news is that if you are staying on task with some very key messaging around the importance of coverage and giving the artist and the YouTube celebs their freedom to create like they do, within obviously those certain guardrails, then the brand and the corporate brand certainly felt comfortable. So a lot of it is communication, ongoing communication.
So what was the riskiest thing you let through?
Well, and I think I mentioned why I didn't say, but we did have brought forth a twerking video on the importance of coverage, and that was ultimately not aired, which was great. But that was the riskiest thing. But we did have Alpha Cat, who is with Maker Studio, create incredible content off of Snoop Dogg called "Drop It Like It's Hot," and that really had a lot of views. So we were grateful, and the conversation honestly was right on brand, and our client felt very comfortable, and it was wonderful to see this young audience get involved with the importance of coverage.
Wow. Well, Carla is my hero, and I can't even imagine leading that initiative. Just crazy. Thank you. Yeah, really. Unbelievable.
Thank you.
I'm going to give a different kind of take on that question. So Pretzel Crisps is coming out with a new brand, and Pretzel Crisp Minis is for kids and families. You can have 35 of them for 100 calories. They're little, they're cute. So how do we launch it? How do we get the right property? Now, one of the biggest sadnesses of my career is that we couldn't get our launch to line up with the Lego movie. You know what? I love what I do because I read the scripts, I see the early animation, and I say, where should we be? We care about mom, we care about education, we care about her wanting to do the right thing for her family. So it ended up that this October was the right timing. And Mr. Peabody and Sherman was a great way to tie that messaging with mom being the superhero to bring the right nutritional items to her family. And we used the Wayback Machine to educate on the history of pretzels and the history of how you can eat healthy and have a good time while you're doing it and really enjoying it. So we had a lot of recipe takeovers on the Food Network. How do you really extend that brand? We had the trip to Washington, D.C. because, of course, Mr. Peabody is the big educator. He's the professor. And so Mr. Peabody style, take your child to Washington, D.C. At the same time, we look at, okay, mom can also have fun with this brand with award ceremonies. So how do we build that arc of communication and messaging that it isn't just kids and families, but it's mom and she's entertaining? And what are the great recipe choices? And Access Hollywood came to us. And so we're looking at that right now, where you can actually showcase the different recipes and how to give the perfect party. But with every brand, you're looking at that landscape of film, of lifestyle engagement, whether it's sports, whether it's music, whether it's gaming, whether it's events, red carpet. How do you find that right mix for your clients with budget realities to help their message resonate?
And I think you were asking particularly with women, one of the things that we did, especially because it was the Affordable Care Act, we were now in a position to ensure that women had Pap screenings, mammograms and things like that. So we created very specific content from a social media standpoint, even earned media, that really could connect with women. And then we would identify particularly, the YouTube population, the celebs and traditional celebs that were there that could really speak to it and were powerful. Individuals like Tatiana Ali, Sophia Bush, Olivia Wilde. You saw a lot of women really getting out there and talking about how this was relevant, to females. And so that, there's all sorts of linkages that you can make, especially as it relates to the female population. And for us, the client was like, go for it, because we need everything humanly possible to switch from that argument to the website not working, because that's the least of our concerns.
That's great. That's great. So at dictionary.com, I wanted to ask you, because you talked about voice in communicating, not just presenting a media or carrying a marketing message, but just the voice in which you deal with customers and how important that is in authenticity and carrying your brand. Can you talk about that a little bit? And that you had some great examples of what worked and what didn't.
Yeah. So I joined Dictionary just over a year ago, and it really didn't have a brand. We had a great URL. It was a website that really looked like it was, it's 20-year-old property actually. It hadn't been updated in a number of years. And so as we were going through the process of figuring out how we were going to revive this website, one of the first things that we addressed is, what does our brand stand for? What do we bring to people? What's our brand promise? And when you're developing a product, that's one of the first things you have to understand, or it can be anything to anyone, which makes you lady's job much more difficult, I'm sure. And so we spent a lot of time really figuring out who's our audience, and it's actually split 50-50 men, women. It's very, very broad. A lot of kids, but also a lot of adults. And so across all of those audiences, what does our brand mean? What do we want to stand for? And after several weeks of work and digging on this, we came up with our brand stands for bringing words to life. And it's very different positioning from our competitors like Oxford or Merriam-Webster. And one of the things that we can rely on is having digital assets that help us do that. And so hopefully over the next 6-9 months, you're going to see more and more about how we are bringing words to life. One of the ways that we implemented that was going actually out on social, because it's an easier lever to do this with from a product standpoint, with our word of the day. And we took our word of the day. Some of you may have seen it. If you go to dictionary.com on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram.
Instagram. I love it every day. Not to give you a plug, but I love that.
It's gotten to be really popular.
It's fun. Yeah.
And we were able to address actually the youth audience on Instagram big time, because that's where they're all hanging out. And so the first thing we did was, okay, what assets do we have to support bringing words to life, and what more can we do? But there's also a tone that we had come up with around this. And like I said, dictionary, it's a 20-year-old property. We have a lot of old content on there. Our original dictionary is rooted in the original Random House unabridged dictionary that was written, I don't know, probably in the 50s. And we don't update all of those terms all the time. There's a lot of words in the dictionary. And so, but we're constantly updating. We update thousands of words and definitions a year, but there's always a few we don't get to. And this summer, we had a couple of bubble ups around definitions or synonyms that really weren't quite appropriate. They were things that people called out to us. And we've had the press come to us a couple of times on definitions. And the way you deal with the press is a little different than the way you deal with a social media flare-up. And with the press, we would put out a statement, and it would be very clear-cut and really not open for a two-way conversation. So, I mean, it was, you know, I'm sure Sue could school me on this big time, but we tend to like say it's this and then we move on. Well, we had a flare-up this summer on social. We have a lot of example sentences on our site. And the team prior to me had made the decision to go out and get these example sentences by crawling the web. And they crawled all legit sites, good sites, Discover.com and Wall Street Journal and a lot of legit sites, but they also crawled comments. And under our homeschooler definition, they had crawled comments, and the comments on there were horrendous. And somebody found them that was a homeschooler advocate, and it blew up on social. And they were horrible, and we absolutely should have taken it down. But the interesting thing from a brand standpoint and authenticity is we went out initially with a PR-oriented type of response to this, which was much more cut and dried. We apologize for this. We're resolving the issue. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. It didn't work at all. And these only happen when I'm on vacation. So I'm in Boston with my family. And it's not stopping. And I hadn't really grokked the whole, I mean, this is over a couple of hours how this flares up. And I sit down and get some quiet time and realize this is bubbling all over social media. And on social media, you have to have an authentic voice. You have to have a two-way conversation. And so we completely revamped what we were doing, and we started responding to everybody directly on, look, moms, teachers, everybody else, we're really sorry about this. This is how this happened. And we engaged directly on a number of blogs, and within about 48 hours, we had calmed everything down. We had taken down the egregious content right away, but we had to get involved in the conversation, and we had to do it with an authentic voice and say, hey, look, you know what? We really care about you guys. This is a mess. We're sorry. It slipped by. But it was all about the voice and all about the authenticity and all about knowing your audience and your channel. And that was really, really important. So good lesson for us. We now have actually PR plans that go for if it flares up on the press sites and it flares up on social media, and how do we handle it?
That's a great example. It's great. I would ask the rest of the panel, how do you deal with that in your voice, not from a media property or the official, whether it's your minions, but if you have a conversation get going in social media or any kind of media, how do you figure out what voice to answer with?
I was just going to say, I know for Take Part and the issue around Ebola, it's becoming a real relevant issue. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And people are really trying to figure out, do I jump the blame bandwagon here for this country or continent, where, and so part of it for us is to, as much as possible, share the facts, source the, other sort of follow-up content areas and partners that we work with on the nonprofit side. We have a whole social action division around all of our films at Participant Media. So when we're talking about engaging in heavy topics like that, and all of a sudden you start to see, all sorts of comments popping off, we have a community manager. We're going and we're addressing, to your point, you were saying immediately following it head on, have the honest conversation, begin the dialogue, and then also have referral sites that people can go to that we've vetted, not just throwing any old site up there, and being really factual.
That's scary though, on that topic especially, right? People are confused. Like, what are the facts? And so that I think example is probably super complex, because you could think that it's factual, like the CDC says X, right? I mean, it's just not clear. And so I would imagine,
but having that open dialogue,
absolutely,
right? Constantly having the open dialogue, because I think that's going to be key if we're not following up. And if we get a comment from someone saying, all people walking around looking like X, Y, and Z have Ebola, right? We have to be able, that can spread, no pun intended, that can do its own thing, right? So we have to be able to have a direct conversation, a very authentic conversation, not like act like we're CDC by any means, right? But let people know if you do have questions, instead of, we don't say this, but instead of jumping to conclusions, it's best to be referred to this site, make this phone call, and there's all sorts of hotlines now, that are out there. So
I mean, we deal with this a lot. We write a lot of stories about body image. Women really want to talk about body image. And one thing that I hadn't really thought about before coming into this job was, women want to write a lot about fat shaming, and there's songs about, being fat shamed and how you shouldn't be fat shamed. And a surprise for me in all of this was women who felt like they were being thin shamed, that the women who are just naturally very thin in all of this conversation, they didn't feel like there was a place for them. And really were feeling very hurt by this, as songs are saying men like curves and curvy is beautiful and all of this, like women who are naturally thin. And, perhaps in my generation, perhaps anything else, I'd been a little bit insensitive to this. So I think in this specific example, we gave a platform to different voices and different points of view. And we made sure, and we continue to make sure, that we cover both of those points of view. But I think as you're looking at a story from my perspective, and we don't cover Ebola, really we don't, but thinking about the empathy in all, thinking as much as you can is full circle empathy. And then being very sensitive to all of those points of view within the text, within how you promote it across social media, and then moderating those comments. I mean, we do a lot of moderating, and we keep reiterating, Hello Giggles is a positive place. This is a place we want you to share your opinions, but let's not be hateful to each other. I mean, just continuing to reiterate that over and over again, and trying to make everybody play nice, even when it's not easy, So I think that's something I think about all the time. I mean, late into the night, were we sensitive enough to all points of view here? And if we weren't, we try to correct it.
So for us, because YouTube is a very, very highly engaged social platform, I think to your point, that makes our job very difficult because again, with 165 million subscribers and 4,600 channels, as you can imagine, maintaining control over the comments and the conversation is near impossible. We do have an amazing team that follows social, but I think that within our general organization, everyone from the CEO to myself and everybody down is really incredibly active within social media. And we do our absolute best to kind of support our community of creators. I think you bring up a really, really amazing point. I think that there's generally been a tremendous shift that is very positive in terms of image and how image is conveyed and dealt with. And I think within the YouTube community in particular, something that we're seeing that's incredibly powerful and also really, really amazing is that some of the biggest creators out there very, very openly talk about the fact that they were bullied, that they were told there were X or Y or Z. And they discuss that incredibly openly and honestly with their community of fans. And the response is really incredible because there's also a very different process that happens on YouTube within Style Hall is that a lot of times when I was growing up, the majority of kind of the idea of what image should be is you get from a billboard or you get from television. And we all know that that is not necessarily realistic at all. Versus what you actually see on YouTube is even when our creators create makeup tutorials or create looks, is they start with, this is what I look like when I wake up in the morning. This is my face just as it is. And this is what I do step by step to get to kind of the image that the end result. And again, that honest interaction and engagement has really helped women across the world really understand that what you see on a billboard is not necessarily the way things are in life. And I think, again, the engagement and the communication that we're seeing within Style Hall is really, really wonderful and encouraging in that capacity.
We have a client, Bear Snacks. Has anyone seen the apple chips, coconut chips? They live online, and this is how they communicate. So they started a campaign, Dare to Bear. Now, Dare to Bear is when you share private, intimate moments that are real, are fun, but they expose you. And yet, once you start that platform, you have to let women share. So how do you watch it, make sure that it's appropriate, but the time and commitment they've given to growing this campaign and rewarding women and the posting and the relationship women now have with this brand because they've let them be real has been magnificent. But you're right. Could it turn at any time? Absolutely.
And you have a plan for that, I'm assuming.
Yeah, of course.
I have a question that came up with several of you and has come up on other panels, and that is, niche or broad. How broad can you stretch an audience and still have that sense of authenticity or direct talking to you? Some of the multi-channel networks now will range, say from 13 to 34. That's an enormous range. I'm very curious from your perspective, from all of you, how, when you start to get a stretch in your brand, at what point do you start looking at, do we create a separate brand or channel that off? Or do we try to stretch with it? In the case of you who have young audiences, do you try to grow up with your audience or let your audience age out of your property?
I think that if you're authentic, right? And if you look at Nike's, if you have a body, you're an athlete. Well, that would resonate if you're 10 or if you're 70. And so I think to your authenticity point, I think if you're authentic, people feel that, and it does span and stretch. I'd be interested to see, the more targeted age specific, like Hello Giggles, how that would happen. But I think authenticity is something that resonates as a human being.
Well, I think there's two things going on here, right? So there's the idea of maintaining the integrity of the brand as you scale, which is difficult if people really connect with the brand and really feel intimate with it and like it's part of them, and which has been very much the case with Hello Giggles. So And we've grown over 1,000% in 3 years, and we've grown 3 times in the last 6 months. So this is a real issue for us. How do we continue to deliver stories at scale, but still have the users and the readers feel connected and feel that sense that this is a cozy, intimate space for them? And part of that is moderating everything that's going on. Part of that is keeping cohesion with the stories. Part of that is making sure that you don't clickbait, that you don't, so that, I mean, we're a very different beast, and we always will be, than something like Style Hall, which is going to be multi-platform, which is never going to be sort of moderated this closely. So I think that, we are very careful about how we package things, about how we art things, about just things staying very specific. And that probably requires more work. And I don't know how that continues to scale, but I think you can do it. I mean, I think you look at some glamour, it's a glamour story. You look at something like, I think we got into problems in digital because people are chasing numbers. So when you're chasing numbers, you're just chasing any sort of story that you think is going to stick, and we just don't do that. Even if I think something's going to click, if it's not right for the audience, we won't do it. So that's one part of it. But the second part of it is, how do you grow into different demographics, right? So we do have very young readers, and we bandy around, do we need a separate teen site? And that may be something that comes eventually. For now, there are things you have to do to keep things safe for this sort of broad swath of readership. And one of those is, we don't talk about the act of sex. We talk about the emotional aspects of sex. We talk about sexual pressure, but we'll never be a site that talks about, we'll never be Cosmo. We'll never be talking about positions. And that's something we have to really think about, because we don't know how ready these girls are. And we have this audience. So in that way, I'm saying, okay, 27-year-old, you're going to have to go somewhere else for the things that are pertinent to your sexual life. And that's okay. That's a choice we're making as a brand. And I think that is how you continue to define your brand, is by making those decisions and sort of keeping things, close and distinct.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, ours is about cause, and our participant media are identifying what market to go after is really around the social impact. So at the end of the day, when we're looking at audiences, it is very, very targeted, because we're pulling levers with respect to impact. So for instance, we just launched a film called Spent with American Express. And in many cases, and we have about 13 million views already. So of course that's going to be general market. But as it relates to what we're trying to move in terms of the meter with that particular film, it was really around the unbanked population and having to move legislation within government and move institutions to think differently. So that's going to be an audience that's around influencers. So how we go to market, and if it's earned media or paid media, we're going to be targeted in that way. So, at Participant, it's very different. Again, it's really about impact and what are the audiences we're going to move in that space.
And I think for Dictionary, we are so broad, and we're a dictionary, right? We are what we are, and we have about 70 million monthly uniques that hit our site. I can tell you, because looking across the social channels, it's everybody from young kids who are using us to help them do homework, to folks that are significantly older, that are using us on the weekends to help them with their crossword puzzles. And we actually see multi-word queries spike on the weekends, and we know it's the crossword puzzler population. We do a ton of analytics, just like you guys do. So on the site, it's very hard for us to differentiate, because we don't necessarily know who's coming in. But across social, for us, that's where we really try to different. And being able to go after a younger crowd on Instagram, where they are, we don't have huge Instagram growth, but it's been completely organic. And it's been really interesting to watch teens pick up Instagram and refer their friends to it. They'll just call out another friend and say, hey, this is your word, to somebody else on Instagram. On Facebook, it tends to be much more of a mom's crowd and a teacher crowd. interestingly, we went out on Pinterest and it went nowhere. We thought, oh, teachers, they're going to love us on Pinterest. Nothing. It was crickets. So, and Twitter is, we get verbed all the time on Twitter, which is really funny when you're a dictionary. But I had to dictionary.com that. And, but it's a less educated crowd that is calling us out on Twitter. And it's really interesting. So our social is what becomes very targeted as opposed to our product itself, because the product has to be a lot more generic.
So for us at scale, our overall brand at Style Hall is the largest destination for fashion and beauty. But within that, given that we have the scale that we have, we've now segmented our brand into a couple other sub-brands that sort of speak to an organic and unique audience. So we have Style Hall Mundo, which is a group of channels that are entirely dedicated to Spanish and Portuguese speaking. We create content in the local languages. We have a massive presence, and we also interact with brands in Latin America as well. We have Style Me Fit, which, as you can imagine, is entirely focused and dedicated to fitness. And again, as you know, fitness is a very integral and important component of a woman's life. We have Style Hall Studios, which is sort of our umbrella of content that we create specifically for brands. And most recently, we also launched Style Hall Originals, which is where we're curating and creating original programming. So I think, again, while the overall umbrella of the brand at scale is fashion and beauty, we have created kind of individual standalone brands and destinations so that you could find the specific audience that you're trying to look for. But beyond that, because we're on YouTube, we have the power of the Google search engine. So if you put into the browser that you're looking for, I don't know, a graphic purple eyeliner you need for a date night, chances are you're going to find that content in English, in Portuguese, in Spanish, and have a variety of offerings to choose from.
You know, on the brand side, we've gotten assignments to do a global gaming campaign, and their audience spans from 6 to 50. Now, social media, you've got to be 13. And you've got to be COPA compliant if you are 13. So there's all sorts of restrictions. With Brown-Forman, we have an LDA, legal drinking age, parameter that you've got to sign up and show that you're 21. You've got childhood obesity as a huge issue in today's world. So Hostess has to be so careful with all of their marketing to go 13 plus or C-store males, with moms with older kids. So we spend so much time vetting what's the right vehicle. How do we get the right message out to the right audience and not hurt our brand?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
It's very interesting. Deborah, a follow-up on that you and I had talked about, which is, and this is women specific, are brands starting to look at whether women are portrayed in the media properties and how they're portrayed in the media properties they put their brands against? And I'll cite a couple things with a shout out to cjane.org, which has great stats and has done research showing it's less than 30% of or less than a third of the speaking parts on the screen in entertainment go to women. And I think it's 17%, correct me if I'm wrong, on background crowds. Only 17% of them are women, even though in real life it's over 50%. So, are brands starting to look at that? Does that have an issue? Does it resonate with how they think of authenticity?
No, it absolutely does. And Madeline should be up here. I'm afraid to even start this. But did any of you see the campaign, Run Like a Girl? And they said, why is it an insult to run like a girl? And they had adults getting on and fighting like a girl, dancing like a girl, running like a girl. And then they had kids get up there and they were all exactly who they were, giving their heart and soul to it. There were no gender biases. So we look at what our kids see. Women are half the population, and yet how many doctors in entertainment are shown as a woman? Construction workers, there's tons. Even in the Army, consistently what we see in the media doesn't represent our world. When I was getting my master's, I did a communication study on children's commercials. Why, if a young girl's product was there, is it a lullaby? Why does she always take a secondary role to the boy, and there's action, there's music? And I was so impassioned at a young age. So I'm reading about Barbie's numbers going down dramatically because, darn it, girls don't want to wear pink anymore.
See?
Hello. So, I love what the digital evolution has done to our world and our kids, because they're saying, wait a second, this is our world. We can be what we want. We can do what we want. And no one's going to tell us there's a standard or a stereotype we have to live to. So.
Yeah, on that, I mean, Under Armour just came out with a spectacular campaign around "I Will What I Want" with Misty Copeland, right? And now, I see all these headlines. Well, look, Under Armour is legitimizing that ballet is actually a sport, right? But I mean, what that has done, which of course it is. I mean, ballerinas and the unbelievable athletes. But what that has done for women, that campaign, and for ballet in general, I mean, I'm with you. It's great.
Yeah, but the question was, what have you been doing about it, not what you've seen about it. So that was her, and I appreciate that question. And I appreciate Madeline being there. I think that many times I applaud you and the group. So what have you individually done rather than passing the buck on what they have done? I appreciate your questioning them on that. Can you answer that question?
Anyone who wants to take
I think that's a great, again,
She asked it.
Yeah.
within Style Hall, again, in addition to dealing with image, which I think is incredibly important, what's also amazing is that our community of creators, they're their own entrepreneurs. Most of them will start by being inspired by a message they hear by another YouTuber, potentially relating to something that they're dealing with in their life, finding that connection, finding that two-way conversation. Then the next step is they'll buy a camera and they'll start out shooting videos.
I'm not talking about them. No disrespect. I'm talking about what you have done. What each one of you have done.
Well, I think what
in the
she's saying,
company
though,
where
is they're not filtering very much, that it is coming up organically.
But it's not, A, we're not filtering, it's coming organically. B, you're supporting an entire business and an entire infrastructure where, in addition to the content that these women are creating on their own, we're also sourcing advertising deals for them. So the majority of the revenue that they're getting is actually coming through revenue streams that we're finding, sourcing, supporting for them. We're helping them with, from the person that initially wants to start their channel, who could be 13 years old. We help them with their contracts. We help them to ensure that they can build out their presence. We educate them. We buy them cameras and tell them, okay, this is what you're creating on your own. Take our kind of Style Hall University tutorial, and this is how you're going to create content so you grow your viewership, which in turn gets you bigger brand deals. We have ambassadorship programs, which is where women within our communities all over the world will go out and have meetups with people that are just starting out in the business, because it's confusing. And I think even just putting a video out there and being completely open to the exposure and the commentary that naturally happens could be really intimidating and really scary. And I think both within Style Hall and our teams that manage these talent, and within kind of the women that have gone through it and have now built a business that are very successful, we use these ambassadorship and mentorship programs to help foster that community. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think as a national board member of Alliance for Women in Media, I'm personally very committed.
Just a little bit.
To this issue, because I think it's very key to make sure that we're monitoring those images. As an African-American female, I'm also very committed to that as well. And so historically, and at least in my professional career, it has been important for me to be that voice at the table on an executive level when I'm seeing decisions being made as it relates to what images and how the context of that image is being portrayed. So I think personally, and I did this at Ogilvy and Mather, and I'm doing, this now in the position at Participant Media, being able to be that voice professionally when you're sitting at the table and decisions are being made. That's the role I've played historically. That's the role I'll continue to play.
I mean, I came on to Hello Giggles in April and, sat down with Zoe and sort of talked about what is the vision going to be for this site? This is this great site that is this really devoted audience, but what does it mean? It has a lot of kittens and it has a lot of best friend stuff, but what does it mean? So we decided together that we were going to embrace the word feminism. Like we had not done that before this moment. So we did that. We've brought on a lot of diverse women's voices. We have trans writers. We have women of color writing for us, many of them. We have those voices coming out in the site, but we also assign stories that I think are really empowering for women. We do a story every day called Queen of the Day, which highlights a woman who's just doing something phenomenal in the world. We do a lot of stories like under something called Please Be Better, which calls out, this is not okay. This treatment of women is not okay. We teach women we give a lot of tips on how to be in the workplace and how to fight sexism. And, it's a huge commitment for us to empower young women and change the conversation and do it in a way that feels really positive and proactive so that it's not just, just an echo chamber. So it really feels like, okay, this is happening. What can we do about it? And, that's part of our editorial mission. So.
And great question. I wish we wrote movies and TV shows. I wish we cast them. But all I can do is help our team, help our clients choose the right properties that are authentic. Zipcar became a client. And in 2 weeks, we looked at the landscape. How many people know what Zipcar is? If you live in an urban city, you don't own a car, you're a Zipster. And you save on gas, you don't pay insurance, you use a car whenever you need it. It's ride sharing. And so The Giver came out. Very strong women, even evil women, and Gina Davis, who runs C. Jane, Thelma and Louise, it was like, we don't have to fit into this box. We can be whoever we are. It's not gender specific. But it was step away from sameness and find out who you are, what's your inner voice. Don't subscribe to a utopian society where everyone's the same. And so all you can do is give good guidance, direction, see young women, young men as people, and what do they care about, and how does the brand help inspire and encourage that? With the Nike campaign, Just Do It, with the Dove campaign, Real Women and What is Beauty, and globally redefining it. Just keeping that top of mind to push ourselves to be true to who our consumer really is.
Nina and Michelle, you guys come out of the tech industry, which may be even tougher than media for women in high places. I'm just curious from a different perspective. You had talked about your brand and how important that is, and what do you guys do from a slightly different perspective, maybe than what was asked?
Well, I can say from the high tech world, and everybody's wearing the lanyard with an SAP company. So I full disclosure, I worked for SAP for 8 wonderful years, and it's difficult to and keep encouraging women to get involved in technology. So personally. Just to mentor women who are coming up and who want to be an executive at a high tech firm. There's a lot of that. It is not easy. A lot of times, like I would look at my management team, majority men. Where are the women applicants, right? It even starts earlier, which is why many of the high-tech firms in the Valley now are really strongly getting in with universities and colleges at the freshman, age, and even high schools, right? To get as young. I don't know if your perspective is any different, but it is difficult.
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, I've been in tech forever, and more often than not, for the first 20 years of my career, I would go into a conference room for a meeting and I would be the only female in the room. And I mean, you don't even notice it after a while, which is bad. And because it becomes just expected. And so Dictionary is actually, we're very diverse, and we're probably 50-50 women and guys. In fact, there's a content marketing meeting we hold every week, and I feel sorry for the one guy that's in the room with all these women, because it's actually, I look at it as the kind of the reverse stereotype. And I think, gosh, I wonder how he feels, recognizing that I never even noticed it, but I'll bet he does because it's really different. But I think actively hiring and trying to be both mentoring women, and I do actually a lot of mentoring for young women. Any young female that comes to me and says, or older, actually, that says, "Hey, can we talk? Can we have coffee? Can you give me some career direction?" I do it. But the other thing is hiring, and I think we have to be really smart and really aware when we hire. Are we doing the right kind of hiring for women? It's very tough in tech because we have a real issue with STEM. I just don't get female candidates for technical jobs. Yeah. They just are not out there, and it starts at a very, very young level. So I don't want to totally go off on this, but there's a lot of initiatives now, especially up in the Bay Area around Girls Who Code, so that we can start addressing this problem at its organic root, because it's hard to hire women in those levels. But I think for most of us, it's about, especially in tech, there are a lot of women who mentor other women because that's really the only way to make it happen.
We have about 15 minutes left, and I'd like to throw that open to the audience so you guys can join in the discussion and ask any questions you might have of what's a great panel. Yes.
First, it really was a great panel. I'm sorry, not for but I enjoyed it. Question for Beverly. You were talking about, I forget which brand it was, or maybe it might have been the Twinkies, but when, was it Eat Entertainment Tonight approached you? You mentioned one TV show approached you. Like
Access Hollywood.
Oh, Access Hollywood with pretzel crisps.
Right, with pretzel. So I was wrong on the product, wrong on
But
the
I'm
show.
trying to bring it to Twinkies. Don't you worry.
The question I have is, in those scenarios, is Access Hollywood looking for a payment to have that story, which is going to be promoting the brand, or are they just look at it as a news story? Or?
Well, their goal is to find relevant content for their audience. Certainly, they've got a monetary goal because with TiVo, DVR, people aren't watching commercials anymore. How do you get your message out in an authentic way that your consumer can relate to and we're not pushing a commercial? In fact, how many people who have DirecTV, Comcast actually watch a commercial? Do you know Heineken Light, when they ran their new spot, they had to make it TiVo proof, so they just had it wiggle. You saw something was different on the bottle, but they said no one's going to actually watch it. How do we make sure people are aware that there's a new product in our mix? So they are looking for relevant content. They're looking for brands to divert their media dollars into content. And again, you can own the content and you can have a relationship with the content. So we're all looking for those right touch points to build, the brand message in a way that their audience believes is credible.
But I'm not sure I really got an answer to the question.
Yes, they're charging.
Okay.
And for drinks, we'll talk about what's going on in this space because it is the wild, wild west. And every day I go, really? Okay.
So it ended up as a sponsored content segment.
But they could control this, segment, bring on their
Right.
spokesperson, make it meet their objective.
Yeah, I think this is in that space of native advertising and branded entertainment, branded content. I think it is the wild, wild west, in that space. And my old former boss, Doug Scott, was a pioneer in helping to create this space. And so I think, but it's exciting when you are looking at Access Hollywood, E-Entertainment, and they're stepping back and saying, how do we draw in, this particular revenue line and get brands to get excited and behind it, and that's where the creativity really comes. So the diversion of, these media dollars going into content now is a whole new world.
And how do you make your advertising feel authentic to your readership, and how do you work with brands so that it's not jarring? How do you work with a company so that it feels on brand for the content?
I think Fast Company is probably a really good model and what they've done. Something co-create, they're making it very authentic. So they're looking for experts in the area of, if it's
Yeah.
creativity, and really proven experts. So they're not saying yes to everybody, come one, come all. They're being very selective. If this is an A-class individual or A-class organization or brand in the space of creativity or in the space of technology, then let's go and begin a conversation. And that's where it feels authentic, because you're, as the reader, saying, yes, I do want somebody that's an expert in this area. Speak to me about that. And I'm okay if it's sponsored by or powered
Right.
by.
I mean, you can align an advertiser and the audience, and it really, really works. It's what the audience is looking for. We've seen that work, and we've actually seen it work the opposite, where it's just like, oh, this audience doesn't care about this product at all, and like, there's no sort of manipulation you can do to make that happen.
I actually think it's, to your point, it's very challenging, but I also think it's very exciting. A couple of years ago, you used to be able to buy prime time and guarantee X number of eyeballs. I think today that doesn't exist. You have to be innovative. You have to really think about how you're positioning your brand. You have to work with experts, to your point, who have an authentic voice that kind of legitimizes your message and spreads your message at scale. When we work with brands, we create different campaigns for Instagram that are custom. We create different campaigns for Twitter that are custom. We create different assets for YouTube. We have year-long programs with brands that have premium content, influencer content across the globe. So I think that while, yes, it's completely the wild, wild west, it makes all of our jobs incredibly difficult, but it is also very, very exciting, because everything that you do, it's really pushing you to be your best and to think outside the box.
Yes, in the glasses on the aisle, and then we'll come one forward.
So what if you're a person who's created a brand, but your brand is evolving? So I started off as a documentary filmmaker, but my brand is now evolving into scripted. And that transition's been difficult with having people move with my brand as a person. Are there any words of wisdom when your brand is changing and evolving, and you're shifting away from what your original brand was? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say open communication. I would say, I don't know how you interact with your audience, whether it's through Twitter, through a website, through whatever medium it may be. I would say open communication. So why is it that you made the decision? So at a certain point in your life, you found inspiration and passion through documentaries. Now you're moving into this new area because either your passion has changed, you found a certain topic that excites you, or it could be something as pure as that's where you make more money. I think the honesty and kind
be
of
authentic with
be
that.
authentic.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I think that the people that appreciate your voice and appreciate your creativity, as long as you are honest about your journey, I think they'll go on that journey with you. And I think they'll actually become a lot more loyal to you as they're kind of going through the journey of what you're doing.
The one other thing I would say is make sure any marketing materials or whatever your social voice or whatever, everything around it has evolved to reflect where you're headed with your brand. Because if you've still got the legacy stuff sitting out there, that's when it gets confusing.
And I was just going to say too, just to add, be really clear about who your target market is. In marketing, we use key performance index. We're looking at KPIs all the time. So from your standpoint, you might say, okay, this is who I really am targeting. This is who I really want to pick up with my brand. And then it's okay to make that, especially if you didn't have maybe a lot of people following you on that other identity, it's okay. But be really crystallized around who am I trying to influence? Who am I trying to get results from?
Great. In back.
Hi. Hi, ladies. How are you?
Hi.
Half of my friends up there. So I have a question for some of you. So I have an online TV show, Kirsty TV. The easiest way to describe it would be like Oprah for YouTube, very emotional, heavy topics. And I'm 2.5 years in, it's online, we've gone from 1,000 views in 3 months to 1,000 a day, and it's all taken a long time. And now I feel like, at what point do you start approaching brands? Do a brand's going to be interested when you have those numbers, or do you need to wait till you have the million? And I have, I guess, more of a holistic brand. So besides the show, I'm a motivational speaker and author. I have a history myself as a brand and an individual. So are they going to be interested in those things packaged together and the different offerings that you can bring?
I think that's a really good
That's about 4 questions. I think we've
You
got-
know,
How do you position?
obviously ad networks, is an opportunity for, brands that are just, or content individuals that are just building their brand. I think the other piece too is, when we're talking about some of the major brands, right? I'll be quite frank with you. They are looking for numbers, right? And they're looking for more than 1,000 views a day. At the same time, there are brands that are up and coming themselves. And so a lot of that is also for you being able to say, what are those up and coming brands that I can begin to affiliate myself with? As an individual that's looking from a brand perspective into who do I want to align my brand with, and what are my KPIs? And so your content may be very interesting to them. So there could be an opportunity where there's even a branded content play, right? Because it could be not necessarily your numbers that make the difference with them. It could be also what you're offering.
Sure.
Yeah, I would add to that. You'll see very similar situations coming out of news startups or cause-related content, and often a sponsorship approach, because they want to be affiliated with discussions around this issue, works when your numbers aren't there for a kind of pure advertising play. Okay, other questions? Right, second row. Yeah, you.
I just, coming from a brand perspective and work in experiential marketing, what do you guys think is the most effective way to measure the impact of the strategies that you guys are building for your brand? Like when you're talking about building brand awareness can be a very objective thing, right? So, people are skipping commercials on DVRs and people are clicking through things on the internet, but they're not really engaging with the brand. They're not starting the conversation. Maybe they're just watching a couple seconds and clicking out, or watching and then leaving, like where you don't have that level of engagement. The numbers can be skewed or likes can be bought. Like, how do you then determine what strategies are actually working for your brand's objectives to then build them out further or renew the programs or keep your
You want to start, Michelle? And then
I can tell you from a product standpoint. So like you guys, we drive everything on analytics and metrics. And so I can tell on any online campaign that we're running, and we don't buy advertising, but we do a ton of stuff on social. So we can measure how much is driving traffic back into the site. For us, it's all about, can I drive additional unique users per month? And frankly, can I direct traffic that I don't have to get via Google? And so we measure everything by how many clicks we get back to the site. And it's very, it's pretty straightforward. And then the other thing we look at is a social user a better user? Are they driving, are they getting more page views every time that they come in? But basically, it's all analytics driven around the different places that they're coming in from, and are we getting new unique users via those channels? So,
at Participant Media, we have our Take Action, tool. So we actually have a tool where you're taking action around a certain campaign, and so we're able to track engagement. The campaign that I just finished running with Tell a Friend, Get Covered for the Affordable Care Act, our number one KPI is, did you go to the site? And did you enroll?
Sure.
That's all that mattered at the end of the day. But when we're talking about earned media, a lot of what you'll hear now with brands, that's interesting. It's great that you have this many impressions. But my interest is the engagement level. Mm-hmm. So when we start to look at that as a measurement, we're looking at the conversations that are happening. We're looking, it's not just the likes,
right?
Yeah,
because that's impressions, right? So it's what's the conversation, and from that conversation, are you then going back to a site? Are you taking action on something?
That's right. It's nice with social media. When we run a campaign, we can track it.
right.
Mm-hmm. How many likes, how many shares, how many comments. But at the end of the day, our battleground is at retail.
Mm-hmm.
What were the sales numbers?
Mm-hmm.
So your client comes to you and tells you, we want likes, and you just cry. Because you know that's not what they mean, but that's the budget they've given you.
Right.
And what they really want is sales. So if I don't put a premium or a code on pack, how can I quantify the result?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't set your objectives at the beginning, what part of that purchase funnel? Is it awareness?
Yeah.
Are they talking about you? Are you getting water cooler buzz? Is it consideration? Is it preference? Is it intent? Or is it sales? So, it's so important. And year to date, how many off-shelf displays did we get? Did we go through our product, to our LTOs? All of that is measured very carefully.
We have time for 2 more questions. I'm going to take on the far right and then you in the blue. Go ahead.
Thanks for being here and sharing your expertise and your experience with us today. I have two small comments and then 2 questions. One is, I find it interesting that we're all here talking about women and branding, and yet we use words like guys all the time when addressing each other. And then I wanted to make a correction on the percentage of women in the world. We outnumber men by 1 or 2%, but still, that's a huge divide. And when we say we're equal in population, we're not. So that's something you might want to bring to the board. The 2 questions are on diversity. Looking at the panel, minus Carla, how is it that everyone does concerted efforts to look for women who can panel events like this that happen to be diverse in their companies or in their work that they do that is similar to you? And how much concerted effort do you outreach, like you were mentioning about going to high schools and for STEM things, or look it out? But I mean, in this day and age, you really have to do some like extra footwork to go find the people that you say you want in your company or in your company at the table to make decisions that are for all women, not just one group of women. And second, when you do a branding, are you loyal to what effects it has on women? Meaning a product that that maybe is cancerous or hurts the children, and yet you are part of a company that backs it as their brand.
So am I hearing 2 questions out of this? One in recruiting efforts toward diversity, and the second, do you turn down brands if you think do you try to measure their effect on women?
I kind of touched on the diversity one.
Yeah.
Our company's relatively small. We're about 40 people. I'm involved in hiring everybody, and you have to be really proactive. But you can't necessarily say, I want someone of this color, of this race, or et cetera. But we really, as a management team, very proactively try to have a strong mix of diversity. And I would say on a diversity scale, we do fairly well. But what is the big challenge for us is, and I mentioned this earlier, is just when it comes to the tech side, actually getting diverse candidates, and particularly women in tech. In other areas of our company, both marketing, content development, very strong in the numbers of women we have and people of color, but it is just much more difficult in tech. And so I think we just have to be aware of how do we help change that equation.
Right. And like at the California Women's Conference, out of 150 speakers, only 22 of them were diverse women, and there was 35 men speakers. So I'm just saying, within all companies, can we also do proactive in hiring women of all ethnicities, not just one group?
I think it starts from the top. You have to say, we need to have a diverse culture because our audience is diverse. And for us, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely actively go out and seek out both editors and writers who are women of color and who are diverse women across the board, because it changes so much the conversations we have and our points of view. I can't know what another person's experience is, and I really like that balance in the mix of our content, and it's really important to us, and it's important to our audience.
I want to get in this woman's question, and then we are going to have to wrap up because another panel will come in. But I think some of us will be up here afterward if people have questions.
Lots of engagement with social media is coming from a younger demographic. But for those businesses and for those brands that are trying to reach an older female, they've got houses, they've got kids, they've got cars, they've got bills, they got stuff to do. What kinds of content have you found really connect with that demographic, such that they can or will engage if that indeed is your target market? Because the first thing you always hear, I don't have time to be on post. I don't have this, I don't have that.
Instagram is so much faster, and I'm glad, Michelle, you put me in the younger category. I feel good. I feel good. No, I know what you're saying, though. Yeah, no, I know it's difficult. Does everybody have a view?
I mean, I think that's changing. I think women are starting to find a lot of the information. So I'm a working mother of two. I have two very, very young kids. I consume all my information. I purchase things. I do everything online because I have absolutely no time at all. And I think, again, is if you are finding effective messaging that is precise, that has the information that you need, I actually do think that online and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram could be a great resource, even for mothers and for people that are a little bit older than your traditional 13 to 20 something. In fact, I would argue that women that are slightly older go to online to research, to purchase, and to find information, versus the younger demographic is there browsing, texting, sharing, looking at pictures, doing all of those fun things that they do. And yes, they're on there for much longer than moms are. But I think, again, it started out with blogs a couple years ago. And now there are communities of moms, whether it's through Instagram or Facebook, that are just looking for information, looking for deals at retail, looking for, again, where to go, what to do. So I do think that bit.
I was just going to say, this is where branded content is really nailing it, because they understand if I go to Safeway, if I go to other brands or baby diapers or what have you, you're not coming to me just to consume the product, but you're also coming to me to consume messages, consume interesting, takes on things or what have you. And this is why that area is blossoming, because you might not just get the information via Instagram or social media, but you're also going to get it when you go to the site where you're researching.
Yeah.
I'm getting the wrap it up signal, so I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan.